Okay, so this is the Climate and Environment Committee of the Charter Review Commission. Good morning. We have Sharon here, we have Dick here, we have Tom Starr and Kyle, we have Bob O'Connell, we have Liz. We are admitting Kevin right now. Kevin is joining. I'm Anne Marie Shanks and I'm the chair. We have some new public members. So just so you know, this is how we operate. 10 minutes before we end the meeting, we go to public comment. Prior to that, we ask the public to keep their video off and their sound muted, so that this is really our opportunity to work as a committee. And then when we go to public comment, we'll have you bring on your video and bring on your audio so you can participate. Sharon gave us some minutes and notes. Any comments on the minutes and notes? We appreciate her doing this.
Anne Marie, did you start the recording?
I did. We are recording.
Okay.
Just
all right.
Yeah.
I didn't get the minutes and notes for some reason. Did they get sent out recently?
I sent
looked
them.
everywhere for them.
Bob, we were hiding them from you.
Good idea.
I sent them to Catherine. Do I usually send them to everybody?
Yeah.
Or Sharon, do you usually send them to everybody?
I don't, because there's
Catherine posts them.
posted,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Okay.
Well, it's just a glitch. So
No worries. Okay.
yeah.
And we are recorded, so there's no problem there. Just so everyone knows, the way I would like to thank everybody for their work. I know everybody's doing a lot of different tasks and it's very time consuming, and I really appreciate everything everyone's doing. Today, we're going to really discuss how this position might operate within San Juan County. And Kyle and Bob have both provided us with materials. I don't know if everybody had a chance to look at those. So I'm going to ask that when we move to their sections, that we'll bring those up on the screen. We'll start with Kyle, and he's going to walk us through his draft documents. These are draft documents. Nothing's been decided on anything. And then we're going to go through a Q&A with Kyle on like each section of his documents so that we can really talk about what we have before us. And then when we finish with Kyle's documents, we're going to move to Bob's document and we're going to do the same thing. Bob's going to walk us through it. Then we're going to do a Q&A on Bob's document. Yes, Liz.
Bob, when did you send your document out? I've not seen it.
I'm sorry. I was working late
Yes,
into the
very
night,
late.
and I ended up sending it to the chairperson and to Kyle as the person in kind of spearheading this effort. And by the way, this wasn't any kind of we don't like Kyle stuff. It's just stuff that I had organized in my head, and I just thought I would.
It was burning in his head.
I thought I
So
would
the
set
good
it out
news
there.
is we're going to put it up and they're
Okay.
going to walk us through it. So you're going to be
Great.
able to hear it and see it. And
Okay,
we'll
it
talk
it
about
wasn't something I missed and needed to
No,
review
ma'am.
earlier.
No, ma'am. I was
Okay.
doing it at midnight last night. Okay.
Okay.
I got you beat, Bob. I think I sent mine at 3.
Oh, dear.
Right there.
Okay.
Because it's a race.
And if we don't get to new business, that's fine. We will focus on that next time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Kyle share his screen. And we're going to begin talking about this work he's done for us.
Okay. Does that come up as a draft proposed?
Yes, that's
people?
great. I'm going to mute myself so you can speak.
So I had every intention for the group of getting this out earlier because there is a lot of, there are 2 parts. There's a heavy kind of word part that is the long form kind of draft, which does, I think will focus on authorities. So just to kind of back up and remember, at the end of last week's meeting, there was kind of a last minute challenge by Bob to kind of put pen to paper for some of the things I was talking about and thinking of, which were really, how does this position fit? How does what does it do, or how does it do it? And my view of that was how it might move forward, say next year, considering some of the forces and the people and the intention that's already on the ground. So what I tried to do was kind of articulate to some extent what I see as places that the county is already doing some of this work, and some of what's still needed in my mind that isn't covered or is covered insufficiently. And I am certainly no expert, so I look forward to additions, kind of additions on the fly. I'm not really sure where to start. I don't enjoy meetings where people kind of read at me off the screen, but maybe by show of hands, and I can see kind of half of you at a time. Has anyone not had a chance to at least read through it at one time? Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, a few of you. Okay. So if you recall the working mission from last week, and I'll just start this way, the mission of the Office of the Climate and Environment Commissioner is to take urgent action to combat climate change and protect the environment. So I guess I will read a little bit here and just say an independent, so what is the office in my mind? And I have an independently structured, proactive, or some word like that, and collaborative office of county government charged with ensuring an action-oriented focus on combating climate-altering activities, working across government to mitigate the impacts of existing climate change, and prioritizing the protection of the environment, natural resources, and related rights of nature as expressed in the county's Bill of Rights. And a note that follows it just says, assuming the Bill of Rights goes as a separate, assuming that we pursue that and that it goes as a separate amendment, I would love this, whatever we do, this final version to, be able to stand independent of the pass or the failure of other charter amendments. So scope, really, I just looked at it as I took language from the introduction to the comprehensive plan and the kind of the statement at the beginning of the county budget, so that there wasn't any reinvention of language. And that talks about the extraordinary treasure of natural beauty and abundance in the county. And really the rest of it is just to denote both the commissioner, the lead of this office, and the office itself as leaders and innovators in the work toward the benefit of what we enjoy now in the county for future generations. But specifically under the direction of this elected official, current select departments, staff, and related citizen advisory boards will be consolidated into a single office whose mission is, and we just read that. This work will include the identification of values, resources, and natural systems at risk, and prioritize the prevention of adverse impacts, the halting or reversal of detrimental actions, and the application of preservation strategies. What follows is kind of a lengthy list. Some of it encapsulates what Anne-Marie has shared already. Some of it is from others of you, maybe a few rewordings of my own. But I think some of the work ahead, should we go this route, is to pack that, and I think I feel this goes to Kevin's kind of prescriptive. We pack that with all the areas where this office and this position have potential impact. So I won't read that to you now. The nuts and bolts of this that I want to have discussion about are, how might the Office of Climate and Energy Commission be organized? And so I'm gonna, if you bear with me, I'm gonna jump to the figure that I made, or that I just sort of borrowed around. And I don't know how well everyone can see. There's some pretty fine print here, and I'm not sure I can enlarge it very well. I'm at my home office. But essentially this is how I see incorporating some or most of the current county positions, county offices, and some of the citizen groups. Go ahead, Liz.
Kyle, I don't think that screen is up. I've still got the document up. Is everybody else seeing the org
Yeah, I was
chart?
gonna say, Kyle, you need to unshare and then choose to share a different screen.
Oh, it's all on the same screen. Okay, thanks. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Black.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you
oh,
go.
there it is. There it is.
Uh.
Can we enlarge, possibly?
Not for you, Bob.
Just make dribble.
I recommend having a magnifying glass nearby. Seriously, I have used a magnifying glass to see some screens in the past.
Let's see.
You got it.
I'm sorry, you guys. I'm not sure how to zoom in and zoom out. It's deactivated for some reason.
Well, why don't you just walk us through kind of the charts so everybody, if
Yeah.
everybody can't read it, they can at least see how the hierarchy
Sure.
is structured.
And you do have it. So if you while I'm talking, wanted to take the time to, or you should, if you wanted to pull it up on your own machines. So this is pretty rough, but essentially the lead of the Office of the Climate and Environment is that, of course, the commissioner. So this sets up a organizational chart of sorts of the position, which mostly, as I mentioned, incorporates what I see as existing services or staffing or sourcing from the county already. And there is, to the left up here, the Planning Commission and future conversation about how to integrate the findings of that group. Do they, in the future, do they advise county council and this group equally? Or I guess actually they advise county council and community development, Department of Community Development. So would they advise all of those groups equally, or is there, what's that relationship? But that's why that's up there. So right now, and we've heard from some of these people, essentially each column is an independent department or collection of people in the county who are already doing some of this work. So to the far left, environmental resources under Erica, I'm sorry, under Kendra, thank you. So the blue dot there is to represent that this department in County Current already has a director. So there's some relationships to work on about how some of that moves around. But under that division right now, or under the environmental resources group, there's a killer whale recovery, marine stewardship area plan, plastic free Salish Sea. Really, all of these either taken out of Kendra's her presentation to us, or off the website, or off local knowledge from those programs that are already happening. And in my opinion, my mind, all of those either are directly environmental protective ventures, or whether they're grant funded or funded by the county, they're all working, I think, under the I feel like under the umbrella of this future commission, or in this office. There are other pieces. So the box number 3 under their action agenda oversight group, and the San Juan LIO, and then maybe some questions, some relationship with the Washington State University Extension Office, and some of the other independent advisor. Would they be an independent advisor to the OCE, or how would that office fit under this new office? So, but that's currently under environmental services or environmental resources, and I think lives well somewhere under this future office. One of the next big questions is, and a lot of us have said this, one of the big areas that is that's concerning is a lot of this work looks that much more important, or that much more timely, because we have in our minds insufficient code enforcement for the legislation and the code that's already in place. So I feel pretty strongly that we somehow need to bring in that authority, or at least share that authority in the county, and have code enforcement for environmental regulations and related county code moving forward. So some share or some break off of community development in terms of code enforcement is going to live here. So land use also under the community development. And again, I'm not, this is what I'm looking forward to in the conversation. I'm not sure how to do that, but permitting and land use is certainly impacts environmental protection and to some extent climate moving forward. So either a share with I don't see that all of community development comes over. I don't know that our office or this office wants to be doing building permits and so forth, but anyway, that's where that lives. And then in terms of kind of the law enforcement or the code enforcement wing, a continued relationship with the county sheriff for things like marine protected area, management or oversight or enforcement, I guess. And then, relationship with Washington Fish and Wildlife. Some of those agencies and entities that are already working in the county to do some of this enforcement work. I see a column 3, this box here, I see a carve out of some of what Health and Human Services does in the county already around water protection. And so the Environmental Health Division of County Health has water resource management, air quality, septic and sewage. I see that moving in some way. Column 4, we've talked a lot about solid waste, recycling, green waste, all of that. And that isn't well, I definitely have more to learn here at the county level, but there's the SWAC, or the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and then the utility countywide. They already work to advise county council, of course, and the town of Friday Harbor. So I don't think the Friday Harbor town council would change, but I see that group advising this office now. And likewise, the Lopez Solid Waste Disposal District would fall under this office, potentially. Number 5, when we're talking about transportation and how the county sources or purchases or somehow acquires the fleet. Right now, I think everyone knows, but there's a fleet services manager within the county, I believe within Public Works, who does all of that under the ER&R, so the equipment rental and reserve process. And I think there's a place, an argument for that to fall under, or at least some component of that job to fall under this office. And then one of the bigger questions I have, there's a fairly extensive part of the land bank's mission. Separate funding mechanism. It too, with the blue dot, has its own directorship and organization, but I do see a role for some of that agency to fall either to work within the office or to somehow be directly available to the commissioner. And I'm not sure how to do that, but another place where I'd like to have some other smarter minds prevail. And then just for your attention, all of the right-hand column are either citizen boards or committees that stand already that I see having either direct impact on this office or maybe specifically mandates that involve or directly affect environment. Those are, as I list them, the Ag Resources Committee, and I have a question for the group shortly after this. Ag Resources, Marine Resources, Clean Water Advisory, the Open Space Advisory Team, and potentially the Noxious Weed Board. All of those in some manner either advise departments or county council. And so would this be a advisory share again with county council, or would some of these potential groups respond or report directly to or advise directly to this new OCEC office? Or there's been some talk, and I'll just draw your attention down to this lower box. I don't have strong feelings on a separate citizens advisory committee. I think there's an argument for both the duplication that it might generate, but also kind of a separateness that it might offer this new department from some specific topics that are already covered in the existing or standing boards. And then the last, two more pieces. There are certainly spheres that the county does not, as I mentioned, I don't believe cover very well right now. Would those be potentially, would there be some advantage to covering those with staffing, or would there be some kind of other relationship built in order to make sure that those areas of the scope of this office were covered? So energy and sustainability, this could be a new position down the road or immediately. And then one of the things I think we've mentioned already, education and outreach is one of the last things that happens because current staff are so busy. So potentially a position there, potentially that's just a bullet on the job description of the commissioner themselves. The middle box in red is just a small sample of the ways that just the environmental resources team or department already has cross-pollination or cross-impact. So membership in the stewardship network and collaborate with all of these other entities, which I think gives them visibility, and also increases what I think most of us or all of us agree on is this position or this future office gains clout or gains traction, I think, by having strong relationships throughout the county and beyond there. So one, I wasn't sure how to place, but I think there's a strong argument for cultural resources that is now, I'm forgetting now, late last night when I looked up, I forget exactly where it resides right now, but
It's in environmental resources.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry. I think there's a strong argument for that to also be at least the relationships that are built with this group already to be within this office. So that was meant to be one page. So that is, other than these kind of additional future, I keep using the carve out phrase, but future development of, there are easily others. We're very concerned. We've been talking about being mindful of the cost that would be generated, and not sure how to handle that. But I would love on that part. That's really thick, and I would love Sharon. You had your hand up. I'd love to hear some conversation. I'm going to stop sharing.
Well, just a minute. I think we should go to what components might be needed to be augmented. I think you've done a fine job in identifying some sources there. So I'd like to kind of continue walking through some of the other things that you've placed there for us.
Okay.
And
I
then
just don't
we'll go
want
to questions.
Okay. I just don't want people to forget their questions based on that part.
I didn't have a question. I just want to say great job.
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Sharon. Okay, did this pop back up to the previous page?
No, so we'll go back to sharing the first screen, the first document.
There we go. Okay. So the other, the components that need augmentation in my mind, and I'd like to cover this and then cover kind of the authorities, because I think that's the place where there might be the most rich conversation down the road. But so as long as I'm sharing now, so topics that are incompletely or not currently addressed at the county government level include energy policy and incorporation of renewables, community and government sustainability and resilience, green transportation infrastructure, and comprehensive waste management as examples. Certainly not all of them. Arguably the limited application of the comprehensive plan directives and guidance, the non-compliance with elements of the Shoreline Master Program, unregulated or arguably regulated tourism, and general shortfall of code enforcement are other examples of places where essentially this county has been unable to meet the mission as we've described it for this for this office. So how there's a conversation there also about how to find those, find better authority. I think strongly about code enforcement goes a long way for some of that, but there are places where expansion of the office to be able to cover these other topic areas just just in impacting sort of how the county develops its own infrastructure, buildings, future capital projects. That's meant to be in there. So augmenting that with a rich and prescriptive recipe moving forward. Okay, so some of the authorities. So basically this left-hand page, and I'll read them to you as I have them. So administrate the Office of Climate and Environment and its employees. The authority to ensure enforcement of relevant codes, regulations, and ensure corrective action, issue fines, and to supervise any employees who are directly responsible for code enforcement. The authority to investigate and cause prosecution for violations against the environment, or arguably anything under the scope of this office. The authority to author mission relevant regulations and ordinance for county council approval. And of course, that depends on what we decide or what we feel about that share between executive and legislative. Hold final authority on planning commission recommendations and actions that are related to the mission. And then kind of as a group, hold final decision authority over county projects conflicting with the mission. Over cases in front of the hearings examiner conflicting with the mission, land use applications, fleet purchase decision-making, and then hold authority over mission-related vendor contracts. And then to finish it out, hold countermand authority over county permit issuance where conflicting with the mission. That's a fairly big one for me, but maybe a harder one to share with community development, or to figure out how to build that, whose mission takes precedence there. Enter into non-binding agreements with other domestic jurisdictions. So there's already international law about what we can do to burden the county taxpayers with international entities, but certainly with other counties and other agencies that do this work in the region. Draw and sign contracts for relevant services to the county. And then these are, I think, more in my mind, there's more conversation around these. Initiate a public rulemaking process for mission relevant efforts. Appropriate contributions, appropriate contribution to the 6-year TIP and to Parks, Trails, and Natural Areas Plan and non-motorized plan. And then finally, the last of what I could think of, mission-related emergency decision-making capacity in any declaration of disaster. So there, I just read to you what you maybe can't quite see. And there are other, functions. I won't read those. Those are really more of, what is the person, we had talked about what does the person do? Some of them are fairly standard sort of department functions, make a budget, supervise employees. One thing I did want to just finish with for everybody before the discussion is I've made some assumptions here, and I think as evidenced maybe by some of the attendees on today's call and other conversations I'm having, and I bet others of you are having, some excitement maybe about the idea, but also some trepidation about how it would maybe impact employees currently working in the county. And so I have the assumption that, at least to begin with, certainly at the transition time, no current county employee will face job loss, certainly without cause, as a result of department reorganization, and any changes to positions that haven't been historically planned or scheduled wouldn't happen until at least after the first year of the position. And then, to search for future workforce, we would look internally, certainly for any expanded roles or unmet need first. I see whether it's 4 years or some other, I may have missed part of the conversation, independent of how long that term is for that person. I think there's an argument to be made about term limits there. So,
and we would follow the collective bargaining agreement for the county. Yeah.
So I'm happy to go back to any of those sheets for discussion or questions.
I think if we start at the top instead of jumping around, that would be good, and kind of take questions as we move through the sections. we've pretty much hashed out the Office of Climate and Environment. If anyone has any areas in there they want to raise questions about.
You mean just the mission and
Right. That's what last week we talked a lot about, the working mission
Yeah.
and the working title. But are there other questions in that section?
I'm not sure what you're referring to as section. I have questions about, or I have some comments regarding some of the different agencies.
So what he has is what is the San Juan County Office of Climate and Environment? So in that section, is there a question for Kyle? Yes, Dick.
A comment, and you alluded to it, Kyle, and I think rightly so, the business about referring to the rights, excuse me, the rights of nature in the Bill of Rights, because if that doesn't get approved by the voters, then we've got this stuck in here. I think, I also will confess, I am leery with the voters about the Bill of Rights for nature. I still have some considerable unease. If it were up to me, I think I would put the period after prioritizing the protection of the environment and natural resources, or maybe find a synonym for the remainder of that sentence. I think it's problematic to put something in there that hasn't been approved.
Okay.
And may not get approved.
Right. Okay. Anything else in that area?
Just for the group, I'm concerned that if I try and manage this on the screen, it will take longer and we won't get to
Yeah,
Bob's
no, I
stuff,
think
so-
we should just try to capture some of the comments that people are making.
Is it okay if I
and
just make notes and maybe
Yeah.
send this out and annotate
Yeah.
later? Okay,
Yeah,
Excellent.
I'm also taking notes, so if one of us
Thanks.
misses something,
Yeah,
the
Sweet.
other.
Okay.
exactly.
thank you, Dick, for that insight. And I don't know another way to do that, and there might be some other areas where that's a factor moving forward if something else doesn't move, doesn't happen in this.
And
Yeah.
I'll see Kyle before the next meeting if I can come up with something rather than just saying, this is no good and not giving you an alternative.
No, I hear it. Thank you.
Kevin, did you have something? And then Bob?
I just wanted to
This
underscore.
area?
I just wanted to underscore the previous comment. I
Okay.
totally agree with what Dick just said for the reasons he stated. So I just think that we should, throughout this document, make sure that it stands alone or has the ability to stand alone.
Okay. And Bob?
I just want to state that I'm kind of blown away about how good this effort is and how comprehensive it is. And I knew Kyle was going to do this, was going to come out with something really, really detailed and very, very helpful. Two of the things that I'm going to steal from what he wrote down and slap onto my thing at the end and that I am kind of, it's really important, is the ability to enforce the county code provisions that deal with the subject matter, the purview of this department, and also the ability to block permits. Wow, which I had not, to block permits, which if they were granted would be harmful to the climate or the environment or the rights of nature. I really, I think those are strong, and I'm very impressed by the whole effort.
Great.
That's it.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Bob.
moving down, we've got what is the scope? And we've got a lot of meat in there. Questions?
Kyle, the word vanguard, is that just because it's in the existing language?
That is not. That's middle of the night wordsmithing.
Well, I think it's a good one because it talks about developing, in my mind, it's developing new ideas. It's being innovative, kind of being a leader. So I liked it.
I mean, I like it also because it all of a sudden tells the brain to pay attention. Something different is happening here.
Right. Dick, did you have a question?
I had a comment and I was going to wait until later, but if we're going to go through this section by section, maybe I'll make it now and let
Okay.
everybody erupt. I think
Nice
Kyle, this is an amazing piece of work. It's no wonder you were up until 3 a.m. But as I was reading through this and following with you, all my alarm bells were going off, because I'm looking at that organization chart and thinking, my God, the office is going to have to be an absolute minimum of 5 people, and I'll bet 5 isn't enough. And you hear the cash register then, and it's a complete reorganization of county government, and I just think it's going to be daunting to the voters. Basically what you're proposing is to take everything in county government that's not an elected office, that's not public health, that's all of public
Social
works except
services.
the environmental resources part, and the law and justice system, and put it under this person who will not and cannot have legislative authority, which I see as a real problem. I think, my reaction to this is I love it in a lot of ways, but I see big problems.
Okay. Other
Yeah,
thoughts?
I don't disagree, Dick, with you. By drawing it up this way, it isn't. It's a cross, I think, between a vision I have, whether practical or not, and how do you generate, not out of thin air, but how do you start an office essentially from scratch that has cross purpose and cross mission and still accomplish the things that you want to do without, and it's not a land grab. I don't want to, I can't imagine being this person under this kind of setup, frankly. But I'm not sure what I see as much, I guess, as successes with the scope and the mission are, if you are a small agency, then there is a back and forth about who's got more authority or who's got more, who's going to focus on which pieces of the sectioned up pie. This is one of those places I think we have the most, it's the biggest reality check for me.
Right,
going through it.
Very hard.
And when you, if I can just respond, when you say you can't imagine being the person trying to run this, one of my other reactions was, this almost looks unmanageable.
So
Yeah, Kevin.
thank you, Madam Chair. A couple points. I want to start by thanking you, Kyle. This is exactly what we needed. It's a monumental task that you've already taken on. And so thank you for getting us here. And this, I believe, is the gist of our conversation. This is exactly what we need to do, is dive in deeply into exactly the points Dick just brought up and that you've put out in front of us in words on paper. So thank you. I have a real back and forth, and I actually have been kind of writing a lot of notes on where to go with this. And one school of thought for me is, Kyle, very similar to what you've written up, which is grab it all and put it under one umbrella so that it's very clear that these are the functions. The other thing is, having been within government and also having paid close attention to a lot of these different actions within government. And I'm so glad Lovell is here. I hope she will speak during our public comment, because I would love her input on some of this. But many of the items that you've included, that also Kendall included in her description of what the county is doing, the county's not doing anything on those. And more importantly, they're not a county program. They're a state program, like derelict vessels or whale watching. And like you have enforcement. I would love to do an audit of the sheriff and Fish and Wildlife. Frankly, I can tell you Fish and Wildlife. But the sheriff, how many times in the last year they've actually done whale watch enforcement, or in the last 5 years. And I'll bet in the last 5 years, it's probably, less than a dozen times total. And so many of those items I think sound great. And that's why they're on a county website saying these are our environmental programs, because we happen to have a person who sits on a committee or something. But we need to also realize when looking at this, that those aren't going to take a ton of time in this department because we don't actually have a role in that work. But the other thing that's more important for me, and where I've been spending a lot of time trying to think through, and Anne Marie and I spoke about this briefly. So let's take the county fleet management, for instance. There's a very important role that this department will play in making sure we buy electric vehicles, making sure that we're appropriate with our fleet choices and use as well. But fleet management and that duty, that function of the county also has so much that is outside of what I see as the bailiwick of this department.
It does currently. It doesn't have. Well, go on. I guess.
Well, I mean, I'm totally open for discussion on that, but I mean, deciding what tractors are needed, or what road planers are needed, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that isn't. And then also in community development and planning, there are functions within that department that would seem to be maybe outside, maybe not. Maybe that entire department is within this. Dick, to your point, I'd say it's not 5 staff, it's probably more, but it's all existing staff. What we're trying to do, and Kendall said this in her presentation to us, was, oh, how wonderful would it be, how powerful would it be if we were able to consolidate all these different people thinking about different aspects of the environment under one umbrella, so that they could, A, learn from each other and work together, but B, be more productive and have a boss whose sole function was climate environment. Right now, you're under public works, where we've talked about there's this cross purpose and conflicts, internal conflicts. Same within planning. We heard from planning, my major focus is to get permits out the door. Rushing permits out the door does not necessarily constitute environmental protections. And so I like the idea, I really love the idea of having a boss for these departments, or at least a motivation for these departments, starting from conservation. So for me, when I look at this, I think this is the direction we need to go, but we're going to need to spend more time diving deeply into these different departments. And what I don't want to do is split them up in a way so that it doesn't function as well, or even better. So the final point I want to make is, the other school of thought I've been thinking about is that this is a smaller department that has some sort of oversight over some of these other departments or these other functions. And even with the county council, one of the things I've been doing a lot of legal research on, it is very clear to me that this function could not create legislation. That is going to have to go through the county council. There may, however, be actions that they can take through executive power as an independently elected official, and we're still looking into that. That said, there's a possibility that we could say that any ordinance that goes through the county council will be vetted by this organization, by this department, with regard to how it is appropriate for climate and the environment. And that's a process that has to happen with ordinances. And we could do the same with other departments. And so it would be a checks and balance sort of thing, as opposed to a direct management or encapsulation of those functions within the department. But instead, this would be the department that's a small, lean organization that does the checks and balance. So those are the two schools of thought for me. One is what Kyle is presenting and what many of us have been thinking. The other is a leaner department that does more of a checks and balance. As long as checks and balance still has strength, I think it would be interesting.
Okay, and this should be a day where we're doing a deep dive, okay? That's what we want to be doing right now. So we're going to hear from Tom, we're going to hear from Sharon, and we're going to hear from Bob.
All I can say is, Kyle, this is a masterpiece. And it's clearly what has to happen for the office to work. That's been my major concern, on how you get all these agencies working, on dotted line arrangements on the chart. And I would remind the group that it's not the first time that major consolidations have occurred in other places. I mean, it can be done. The work and just changing the budgets will be considerable. It'd be interesting to have Mylene's take on the work that would be required to do that. And as a vote in the minority on this committee, it's really clarified for me what it would take. And I applaud you, Kyle, for your work here.
Thank you, Tom.
Sharon?
Briefly,
Sharon, Bob, and then Meliz.
yeah, just to say that we're also talking about having an advisory committee that I think can pick up some of that legwork. So I'd like to, look more into that. And also in terms of funding, of course, there's no guarantee on this right now. But if we have good governance on the state level and on the federal level, I just wonder if there might not be more and more funding for climate concerns coming down the way that we might be able to take advantage of.
Bob, you want to speak? Or
Yes, just very briefly. Although I think Kevin may have covered some of what I was going to say, or the nature of it. Just to take one example of it, which is the fleet management. I don't think that this department would take over fleet management at all. All this department would do would be something like having the purchases that were proposed by the people who are doing the fleet management written up very shortly and sent over to this department, which would then approve it for that it's okay with climate and environment, that those purchases work or that they don't work, and have the power to ask them to work that out to the place where it does work, but wouldn't be managing the fleet itself.
And I just want to focus on this fleet management a little bit, because I remember Kevin talking about how Bill Cummings, when he was the sheriff, said that was a resolution. I didn't have to do what you wanted me to do. So what is it that makes us buy these vehicles that are going to do more work to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions? I mean, so if it's not under this area, how are we going to get it there? Is it like you're saying, Bob, just like this position, she, they have the authority to say you can't purchase that vehicle, and hey, by the way, we want you on bicycles 24/7 a week? I mean, I'm just asking the question. So go ahead, Liz, you take it away.
My question is actually, Tom, if I understood you correctly, you said something about that this wasn't the first time sweeping consolidations had been successful. And I just wondered if you were referencing sweeping consolidations in the county, and if so, if you could say more about those successes. What happened, how they occurred?
I don't really recall anything as extensive as this in San Juan County, but my point was that it's not a terribly daunting task to do consolidations. I mean, they are kind and it may be kind of difficult, but cheer up.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Kyle, go ahead.
I'm wondering, at risk of forgetting this, I wonder if, we have more traction, I think, at least, or we're further along. We know what we want in terms of position and authority, maybe, than some other groups. If there's time moving forward, I would love to hear from some of the people who might be impacted, whether it was this version or some other sort of agency or departmental consolidation. What is if you're Lincoln Borman, what is your thought? And, at some point, I feel like I or others need to speak with him about it, not to say, can you give us permission, but, what does it look like if your agency department is reorganized? And I think some of that, I don't have all the inside information, and I appreciate how much this can impact this, employees in the county and the leadership and, their own visions and their own sense of scope. So I don't know how to do that, but I
Okay.
think somebody could come talk to this group, some of these impacted
Okay.
department folks.
Okay. I'm wondering if now we want to switch and move into Bob's document and talk a little bit about that, and then come back and talk about the two of them together. And I'm trying to figure out how we keep moving forward. So does that sound like a good way to go? We'll go ahead and go to Bob's document. Okay.
I feel like I'm torn, Anne Marie. I feel like this is starting to be exactly the conversation we need to have, and I want to go deeper, but I also don't have the questions articulated in my head on what going deeper is. So maybe it is, we go to their
and the
document.
thing is, Bob's is more visionary, not drilled down quite as much, I think. So that's why I think it gives us a pause to kind of let some air in and then come back down and see, okay, of this, what should be here, what should be there. There's certain pieces of his that I think you'll find really relevant. Yes, Dick. Yes,
Although I have to say, what Kyle's done is pretty damn visionary. And I mean that in a
yes,
positive
no,
way.
I didn't mean it
But-
otherwise. I
but-
didn't mean it any other way.
No, I know. But I think it might be useful to look at what Bob has done. I agree with
Yes.
you.
Okay, so Bob, can you share your screen?
Kevin, can you do that for me? I don't know how to do that.
I don't have yours
He
up.
doesn't have your document.
Oh, okay. So let's
Kyle
see.
has it. Kyle, can you bring his document up?
Oh, yeah, Kyle. I'm forever saying Kevin when I mean Kyle, and vice versa.
That's okay, Sam. I get it.
I can't get by the K, so I'm sorry. Getting old. I think it looks like Kyle's working on it.
He's working on it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we all should be kind of looking at the piece that Kyle gave us and saying, like we did, like people said with fleet management, not so sure about that. Well, what do we need there? You know?
Let me tell you, as he works on it, that there are two things that I added to this as Kyle was reading, because they were so boing. How could I have left that out? Thing, and I've just written them out on the second page, and they're brief, and I'll deal with that when we get to that second page. But they have to do with the enforcement of codes and also the blocking of permits.
Hopefully that shows up.
Blank
No,
document.
not to
It's
me.
a blank document.
I love that
That's-
open space, Anne Marie.
That's not happening. Okay. Stop
That's
sharing.
the space of all possibilities.
Yes.
Well, I could try if
No, we can do it.
Okay, all right. I suppose I ought to learn how to do this. Just about the time when the commission is dissolving, I'll figure out how to do this.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, hey, Tom, I really appreciated your comments so far.
Yes, I think they were very
They've
good.
been very encouraging and enlightening. I think that what Kyle has done is going to really help to bring us together, because he has pointed out what the real difficulties is that some people have been going, oh no, about. And okay, here we are.
There we go.
All right. On the second page, 6 and 7, those are going to move down, and then there's going to be a new 6 and 7, which I'll talk about when we get there. But okay, this is the a draft of the proposed duties and mission of the Climate and Environment Commissioner and the Climate and Environment Department. I don't know how to do this otherwise, other than it's so short that giving it a read will be okay, I think.
Okay.
To draft and propose to the county council ordinances which would implement in practical terms those provisions of the San Juan County Home Rule Charter Bill of Rights which pertain to climate protection of the environment or the rights of nature. And we can take out, if the Bill of Rights doesn't pass, we can take out that portion and redo it. But the commissioner should, what I meant by doesn't pass, I meant doesn't get
Right.
out of the commission itself is what I
Right,
meant.
got it.
The commissioner should ensure that these proposed ordinances, A, are not vague, but definite in their terms, and B, do not deal with the subjects preempted by the Constitution or laws of the United States or of the state of Washington. Those things are put in there because of the Lake Erie case, where the Lake Erie Board Bill of Rights got tossed out in the federal court for those two reasons. Okay, and they're any lawyer will tell you those are very salient and important reasons, and things that you should not you should avoid doing. So that's why those are in there.
So don't violate the Constitution.
That's a good idea, really. And
I got that. I got it.
Yeah. Okay. Just remember that, Kevin. All right. To review ordinances proposed or passed by the county council to determine if the effects of those ordinances would be harmful to the San Juan County's climate or environment, or would violate the rights of nature as set out in the Charter's Bill of Rights. And then there are two alternative phrases depending on where we go on the executive's right to veto. Okay. And to exercise the executive right to veto such harmful legislation, the county council would have the right to override such a veto with a unanimous 3-0 vote. Or if we don't like that one, we would use, and to make the argument before both the county council and the public that such an ordinance should not be passed or should be repealed. Obviously different in character. 3, to lobby our state legislators and our representatives and senators in Congress for the passage of legislation which would aid in the protection of our county's climate and environment and the rights of nature as they are set out in the Charter's Bill of Rights. 4, to prepare and publish to the population of San Juan County a semi-annual report on the state of our efforts here to protect our climate, the environment, and the rights of nature, and to make such additional interim reports as shall seem advisable. 5, to organize grassroots efforts in this county to support the protection of our climate, the environment, and the rights of nature. Then a new number 6, which isn't up there, would be something like to enforce all county code provisions dealing with the subjects under the mission of the department. And the next one, which isn't up there yet, would be to block permits which would be harmful to the climate and the environment and the Charter's Bill of Rights. Then what is up there, which would be the new 8, to sponsor special projects from time to time, which will help to protect our climate and the environment, and will reinforce the Charter's Bill of Rights, and to seek outside funding, not from the county treasury, to support such projects. And finally, to perform such other duties as shall be fit and proper and necessary to support in support of the mission of the Climate and Environment Department, as that mission is described above. And the more I heard of Kyle's presentation, the more I was humbled by it and realized how much has been left out of this draft. But it still is the skeleton of what I see as the duties of the commissioner.
Questions for Bob on number 1? I can't see everybody's hands, but let me. Okay.
The first one has to do with the ordinances, drafting and proposing to the council appropriate ordinances, etc.
Right.
So
Yes, Dick has his hand up.
The one that jumps out at me is the ability to veto ordinances. I don't think there's any question, but that's a legislative authority and is not constitutional.
I don't know what you mean, Dick, by a legislative authority. You mean
if you can pass an ordinance, that's legislation. If you
Okay.
can veto an ordinance, I think any court would say, no, that's part of the legislative authority.
Courts have uniformly told folks in this kind of case that executives, the President of the United States and all 50 governors, as part of their executive power, can veto, and that is not an exercise of legislative authority. If they were to allow some other person to decide on what the veto would be, it would be unconstitutional. But as long as it's the executive, it's a exercise of the executive authority, and that's why I think it's okay. And I challenge anybody to show me where it's not. I could be easily wrong, Dick. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's absolutely. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I'm just going by the logic of the way that.
Well, but my
things are set up.
response to that, Bob, my response to that would be that this position is not the executive.
Oh, well, I would say it definitely is. It's an executive position. It's got to be legislative, executive, or judicial. It's certainly not judicial or legislative. I think it's executive, and the fact that elected brings with it a carved out amount of executive power. That's what you do when you create a department and make the head of it an elected person. You carve out a certain amount of executive power, which the council really cannot tell the person that they can't do.
Okay, let's hear from
Kevin.
Kevin. Let's hear from Kevin, and then we'll come back to Dick if he still has a question.
So I'll preface this by saying within days, I will be able to give this group more legal research. I've been reaching out to different friends and colleagues who are experts on just Washington state law, on charters, so on. So I think Dick's point is well made. And Bob, I get what you're saying, that this would be an executive. They're going to be an independently elected official, and it's our job to figure out how strong we can make them within the law. The issue, though, the examples you gave at the state and the federal level are set forth in the state and the federal constitution. And also in that constitution and in statute at the state level is dictated what the authority of a county government is and what it is not. And the legislative body's authority at the county level is set by the state, because we are an office of the state. And so the legislative functions are set in statute and somewhat in constitution within Washington state. And so the question I have on the veto, I agree with Dick. I don't think the veto of county council ordinance is within the jurisdiction that we can create within a charter. I think we would need state statute to grant that authority to this position. That said, I think that there are still outstanding questions there that we don't have the answers to. And so I think this is a fascinating conversation, and I need more legal input over the next, and like I said, hopefully we'll have some soon. I know that there's some different folks in the community really diving into this question.
Right. And so if we can hold that concept and this whole discussion until we have something more tangible to deal with, I think it would be worthwhile, because we've been down this road a couple times. And I think what I hear everybody saying is we do want this position and this department to propose ordinances, and it's a proposal of an ordinance. That's what we're saying right now. Number two, we need more research on.
Right. Number two is the one we've been talking about. And I'll say this, Anne Marie, I think there's certainly a chance that what Kevin and I think it was Dick were saying will prove out to be true. It's certainly a possibility. And that's why I put in the alternate provision in here, which says, and make the argument before both county council and the public that such an ordinance should not be passed or should be repealed. Certainly, no, they would have the authority to do that in the alternative if that research pans out that way.
Okay, Tom, you have a question?
Well, yeah, I guess this is for Bob, because I think I read on your text somewhere the reference to blocking permits. I'm going to put my developer hat on for a moment. And we think that we have complied with SEPA and all the other state regulations and are applying for this wonderful project. And all of a sudden your department wants to block the permit. How does that happen? And how does me and my attorney's argument that we complied with SEPA and all the regulations, how does that work?
I'll just tell you this, Tom, I didn't even have it in there until half an hour ago when I listened to Kyle's presentation. But I imagine it would be something like that the issuing of that permit, the pending issuing of that permit would have to be sent over to the climate person, and the climate person would look at all of our interests and would would block it. But then, of course, the person wanting the permit would have the right to appeal that to whatever board that would be appropriate to appeal it to.
Okay, Kevin, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think block is the wrong word.
Okay.
And so part of it for me is semantics on this.
Okay.
I don't think this person would be able to block a permit. I think Tom is making a very solid point, which is they've complied with the state and county ordinances for their permit. They've complied, period, end of story. Anybody can appeal it, but there's a process for that. I think that there, again, back to the two schools of thought. One is if permitting and planning is under this department would do the review and have a motivation that is environmental protection, that within current state, county, federal law. But they would be doing the review. And so they wouldn't block the permit, but maybe they don't approve the permit because it doesn't meet the requirements of SEPA or the Shoreline Master Program or other different regulations that we have in place that the county has authority for, not Shoreline Management Act under the state, not Coastal Zone Management Act, not whatever other consistency, but the county jurisdiction and abilities. So one school of thought is that they wouldn't approve the permit in the first place if the folks doing that function within the county were in this department. The other school of thought, which I was saying, is there's kind of a checks and balance. So this department would come in and work with the folks at CDPD or whatever it's called now, the planning department, and do a review that would be taken into consideration by the officer or the staff person who was actually doing the review of that permit. And so this department would come in with their checks and balance ability and say, hey, have you considered this? And it would be harder for the staff person to just ignore that and for the separate department to ignore that if this department were saying, hey, you need to consider these different aspects.
Right. And that takes us to what we heard from Barbara and what we heard from Kendra, in terms of the importance of having someone at the top that supports them and supports them as they go forward, even to the council. Dick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just following on that, because I was also going to raise the blocking permits, but I figured I'd just take one issue at a time. I think if planning and development wasn't in this department, if that's not the way this thing evolves, it's still one of a really important function that this office could serve is if permits had to go through that office for review and comment, even if the permitting authority went ahead and issued a permit contrary to the findings and recommendations of this office, what that accomplishes in Tom's scenario is if someone wants to appeal the permit, the comments from this office has created information and a foundation, a basis for appeal.
Okay, Kyle, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay, Bob?
I like Dick's comment. I think that would probably work rather than give them the direct authority. And also, couldn't this department itself appeal the issuance of the permit if it went forward?
Probably.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good way to make it more palatable and accomplish the close scrutiny of permitting that we need to do.
Yeah, I guess I would try to set up structures where there wasn't a lot of conflict. I hate the idea of one agency appealing a case or you know what I mean, fighting within in government. I think the more we can kind of get in where we need to get in and not have us all in court would be good.
As long as they're not rolling over us.
Yeah, well, that's why we need to talk about the authority. Tom, and then Kevin, and then Liz, did you want to say something? And someone posted that we need to talk about what we're afraid of. And I think that that's an important piece as well.
I would just say that it's you know, not frequently, but permits get appealed. One of the primary appeal agencies is the Friends of the San Juans.
Mhm.
And I've had projects that suffered long court cases in Superior Court because they got appealed. So I'm wondering if this new office would want to engage in that kind of activity of appealing permits to Superior Court.
Good question.
Yeah, Tom, and then Liz.
Kevin and then Liz.
I'm sorry, Kevin, and then Liz.
Liz, you haven't spoken yet. If you wanted to go, and then I can comment on things.
No, go ahead, Kevin, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. 2 points to the idea that this agency, this department would be party to, would initiate a suit against another department in the county, I think is not something that we should be putting out there. I think that creates a really difficult narrative. And I will say there are very rare circumstances where departments have filed an amicus brief. So another department has said they're going to do something, and one department, and they get appealed by X entity, and another department maybe files an amicus brief within that. But even that is extremely rare and really extremely difficult. And so I don't think we want to set up a situation where we have one department that is suing other departments. The county suing itself is, remember, these are all county. So the county suing itself is not a place we want to go at all. I think we should really try in how prescriptive we are to move away from that. I wanted to get back to Dick's point, which it reminded me, it was actually something I spent a lot of time researching and kind of writing different ideas. And I kept coming back to the Planning Commission as an example. And now this department will obviously have significantly more authority than the Planning Commission. But I can remember a number of cases over the years. And again, it's not the norm, but there have been cases where the Planning Commission came with a recommendation that did one thing and the county did another. And when that permit or whatever it was appealed before the judge, the argument was your own planning commission said that you should do it a different way and you didn't. How do you explain that? And so that's a scenario that I see playing out with this department if it is more of a checks and balance, that they would come out with a recommendation saying, we wholeheartedly disagree with moving forward on this. And then the planning department says, well, we're going to do it anyway. That sets up case law that is going to be really fascinating before a judge. And so while this department doesn't have to sue another department, I think that's a really bad idea. I do think this department having the autonomy under an independently elected official to come out with strong recommendations that if they're ignored could be used in appeal makes sense.
So one of the questions that Kyle had put to us is, what is the relationship between this department, the CDC, and the county council? So is the Planning Commission advising all three of those groups?
So,
and that's just a question to anybody.
Yeah, technically the Planning Commission advises the county government. Now, technically their recommendations go from them to the county council or to the department as well. In formulating, so when the department is formulating their recommendations, they'll have input from the Planning Commission through their process. And also the Planning Commission holds hearings. I think this department would be able to hold its own hearings and receive public input when they're reviewing a process. I think that's very important. But technically, if this goes forward the way we're discussing, this would be an independently elected official. So this department would be a peer with the county council with very different jurisdictions, but they would be peers. The planning department, if it stayed as its own department, would be a separate department that answers to the county council eventually through the county manager in the current structure. However, this department, through checks and balance, would have a very close working relationship with the planning department in that scenario if they're not underneath them. If the planning department were underneath this department, then the planning and permitting department would answer to this elected official and not to the county manager. And I think that's the discussion we're starting to have now is where do we place this?
Yes, Bob.
I just wanted to say a comment that how valuable this discussion is, because I'm hearing from people with practical experience where my brain is just theoretical, and it makes me shift my positions and rethink certain things. I just think it's great. That's all.
That's good, because that's what we're here about. We're trying to close the divide so we can move forward to the future. Liz, go for it.
So I want to add my voice to Anne Marie and Kevin in terms of let's not do anything that sets up a contentious government structure. And then the other piece is to not in any way derail this conversation, but to put a placeholder and then move on from it of this department, this office doing something more than levying fines, that it include a restorative responsibility. Because I understand it, one of the things that occurs right now is people who can afford it simply include the fines in their build out costs. So whatever it is that we do, and we do irresponsibly or against the code, then we just pay the fine and move on. I'm suggesting that this office has the ability to hold them accountable to restore the damage they've done. So if it's a seawall, then they are responsible to restore the natural habitat. And I just didn't know where that goes. And we can move on because this is a really valuable conversation. And I don't know where that piece of it belongs. I just didn't want it to get lost in the process.
Yeah, Kyle.
Two things. Thank you, Madam Chair. Quickly, going through this over the last few days, I used sort of a 5/10 year window. I think there are a number of things that are a little shocking, actually, year one or right out of the gate. But try to imagine, what this looks like once there's a kind of a head of steam, or the relationship part, the people part, the opinions and the human factor is, it's never going to go away. But once we're worked through that part, what does it look like in terms of relationship? And I think to make it a small, lean group is attractive for a lot of reasons. But whether it's intra-county lawsuits or complexity and friction, the only way I see doing it, and I can't tell you I'm convinced of it, but the only way to do it is to make it fairly large and avoid where possible the places where there's mutual mission, or the place where two agencies are trying to accomplish the same thing, or believe that they are, and then there's a setup for who has larger authority over final say, or who gets the last hit on something moving forward. Or I think we can accomplish that, but the only way I've seen to get away from that friction is to build the office larger from the start.
Okay, Dick.
Thank you.
That's Kyle was a good introduction to what I wanted to say, because that is the argument for going big. And I think before we spend time diving deeper into these, maybe that's a question we need to explore and see where we are. That probably the smallest view of this is the one Kevin cited as an alternative, which is this becomes an agency that both collaborates with and supports the county council, but is also an environmental thorn in their side when need be. That's the smallest vision. The biggest is what Carl has put forward. Bob's is somewhere in between. And I think it might be useful to have a discussion and see where we all are on our views of what's what's doable. And I'm constantly thinking about what is realistically possible that the voters might approve, especially coming out of a pandemic year, assuming we don't have a fourth wave, and we are coming out of the pandemic by the time we get to November.
Good points. Okay. Kevin?
3 points. One is, Liz, to your seed that you planted for us to circle back to. I believe that the only way, in what I understand so far with regard to the law, that this agency will be able to force the reclamation or restoration of sites and go down that sort of discussion is if the permitting and planning department were within this department, because that's where the legislative authority lies to approve permits and then also to act upon violations. So currently the planning department has the ability to say, they do a stop work order, and then they could say, okay, now you've done a stop work order, now you need to restore the impact, which almost never happens, never. The house on Davidson Head 20 years ago is the best example of that I've ever seen, where they brought in a house in the middle of the night on a barge, cut down all the trees, destroyed the shoreline, and then the house was there and they got a stop work order, but they said, well, we can't put it back on the barge. So the house is still there. The people live in it, they're happy, they paid their fine, it's all great. So if the planning department were within this department, the motivation may be different. And so to get at your point, I think that's the only way to do it. My second point, I can't remember who was saying it, Dick or Kyle, maybe it was Tom, but it was Kyle. I really appreciate you thinking years out on this. This will be difficult at first, but I was very fortunate that one of the greatest mentors in my life was Bill Ruckelshaus, and I got to work personally with him for almost 20 years. And he used to tell me these stories about when Nixon created the EPA, and what a total snafu it was, just totally like the entire federal government. Everybody was like, why am I in this department? Why is my jurisdiction coming into this new department? 5 years later, it was the norm. 10 years later, it was functioning really well and really made serious impacts. And so I think we need to recognize that this will not be easy if we go with the bigger scenario. I don't even want to call it bigger, but we'll call it scenario A, which is closer to what Kyle's laying out. There will be difficulties. There will be growing pains. However, I think what we need to do is keep our mission in clear focus. And for me, I back up. I like the mission we've developed and I like the brief description of it. So I back up from that and say, okay, what's the best way to get there? To actually achieve these changes, to have the environmental protections and the climate actions that we want. What's the best scenario? The last thing I would say is I would go back to what I said before. Some of this, I don't have the information to give me an idea of where I fall on what scenario or what combination of scenarios, because I don't have that legal input yet. And some of this will be questions for Randy. Some of it, I know others in the community are already looking into. And I think in the near term, we'll start having more information that will inform that with regard to legally, how strong could this independently elected officer be? And how strong could their department be? And so I think that, even by next week, we'll have more information. And within 2 weeks, most definitely, we'll be able to start to finalize this with legal backing and findings.
Yes, Bob?
Madam Chair, could we find out from the entire committee where individuals stand on making this department as strong as it can possibly be, given what Kevin finds out about the legal requirements, after we find out what the legal requirements are? Can we find out? Because I don't know the answer to that. I know I want it to be as strong as possible.
Okay. Sharon, where are you on that? On how strong do you want the department to be?
As strong as possible.
Kyle?
I guess just to answer the question, I would say the same thing. The answer is really not that simple, though. I don't think.
Right. Dick?
What I would, in my view, and from talking to people, what I would say is as strong as possible, meaning what we could get the voters to approve is to put planning and development, and environmental health, and environmental resources from public works. If you put those three under this department, I think that might pass the voters. Beyond that, I don't think so. And I at this point don't support going beyond that.
Dick, could you list the three departments again? I missed it.
Well, planning and development,
Okay.
the environmental resources portion of public works, and environmental health out of the health department.
Okay.
Kevin, and then Tom, and then Liz.
I want us to create whatever we can. Sorry, I'm getting a call from another subcommittee chair that makes everything turn off. There you guys are. Sorry. I want to set up whatever we can to meet that mission that we've discussed, which is, for me, summarizing that we begin taking bold action on climate change and really protecting our environment and our natural resources. And so, is that as strong as it can be? I hope so, but to Dick's point, I think if we try and create a mammoth overnight, I think there's going to be, even people who are deeply concerned about environmental protection will have questions, and you get too many questions, this isn't going to pass the voters. So I think we need to be bold and realistic.
Tom, and then Liz.
I'm trying to be a productive team member here, you might have noticed. So
I think that's great.
I think that we need to go big. I mean, I like the org chart that Kyle made, and so I still feel strongly that it was a good shot at showing what has to happen.
And Liz?
Wow, I'm going to vote in alignment with Tom.
Okay.
I historically, this is not a time to back down or back away. I just feel like history is asking us for something very different than our current behavior, and this sets us on that trajectory.
And I'm yes, Sharon and Bob.
You first.
I just want to say one thing. I get triggered by the word realistic because people have different perceptions of what is and is not realistic. And I think what we're doing is visionary, and you have to push beyond what may have seemed realistic. And I think realistic and bold kind of conflict with each other in certain ways.
Okay, Bob?
Anne-Marie, you were going to tell us how you stand.
Well, I like the idea of environmental health, and I like the idea of the environmental resources program. And I really want us to do something about greenhouse gases. I want us to have a role in that. And I'm struggling with how we get there, because that's like a major piece of what our county, if our county can lead by example, we can move other people along with us. We can move the rest of the population with us, you know? So I'm bigger probably than Dick. I'm not sure about the environmental planning group or the planning and development group, what their role should be in there. But I do know that we cannot continue to have the enforcement of the codes the way they currently exist. You know, so that's where I am. So, but I like the rest of you, am anxious to hear some legal research that we can kind of move forward with. Go ahead, Bob.
Can I briefly suggest then that the committee is unanimous in its desire to go as strong as possible, although there are some differences in the definitions of what that means, and that we ought to set as a floor the incorporation of planning and development, and environmental resources, and environmental health, moving those over, and then the rest of what we've been talking about. And then as a ceiling, no ceiling. We're not there yet. We don't know what it is. And somewhere in between that floor and that ceiling is where we need to end up. So we have now eliminated anything less than, if we adopt this idea, we've now eliminated anything less than including those three. How about that?
Sharon?
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to highlight that, we as a commission have all of our meetings open. As we've said before, anybody can come on and make comments, and we are encouraging people to do that at various points. So this is the time for the public to make comments and let us know what they want. So maybe we need to do a little more outreach and just work a little more on encouraging people to join these meetings.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? I think Bob has put a way, our next steps kind of in front of us, which is, do we want to discuss now where does solid waste fit into this, or does it not? Because we have plastics already in environmental resources. We had people in the town hall talk about green waste, and that's something that this office could advocate for, even though it wasn't under their responsibility. We also are kind of saying, let's leave the land bank and some of these other conservation entities like parks and stuff like that out. Kevin, and then Liz. Kevin?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about how to articulate this. I'm really torn. I can make a straight-faced, strong argument for why, solid waste would be in this as an example. Solid waste or the land bank, whatever, name your entity, would be within this department. I can make just as strong of an argument of why it shouldn't be. And on the shouldn't be, because we've talked about why it should be. I don't want to do anything that is going to dampen our incredible staff's ability to do their job. And so solid waste does a lot of stuff that is way bigger than what we're thinking about. I think there are aspects of solid waste that are 100% I could see with being in this department, and I could see other aspects of solid waste maybe not be. I'm not sure. As I'm saying this, I'm kind of counterpointing myself even. But I don't want us to create problems for our staff or for our county to function in a productive manner. And so with solid waste, with the fleet, with I think talking about the land bank for a second, I think the land bank has survived and done such an incredible job because they've had their own autonomy for the most part. The county council about 8 years ago tried to neuter that, and they weren't successful really. But the land bank's autonomy has allowed them to function in a way that has been successful for their mission. And I don't want to dampen that. I don't want to screw that up. And so whatever we do with bringing in different departments or not, I think that we need to think about how it is that they function well and make sure we're not getting in front of that.
I think it was to me, I want to go back to Bob's question and say, do we have a floor, agreed upon starting point?
Well, that's what Bob was proposing. He was proposing that we have environmental resources in here. And I think he was proposing that planning and development is in here. Is that right, Bob?
Yes, and environmental health. I think those were.
And environmental health would be.
Those were
also
Dick's
separate.
suggestions. And
I just want to come back to that and say, can we ask that as a question? Can we agree that we have that as a floor?
Would it be appropriate, Madam Chair, to make a motion at this time regarding that? About how far we've gotten at this point?
Sure.
In
Dick,
that
you want to
case-
say something
yeah,
first?
Dick.
I would suggest it's not. I would like to hear what Kevin comes back with in terms of legal analysis
Okay.
before we do that. Otherwise, we may just be spinning our wheels.
Do we have a time frame on that? Do we know?
Kevin, you're thinking about a week or two, right?
Max, yeah.
Okay, so
what
by
I'm
the
hearing is
21st,
There's some other folks in the community who are really excited about what we're doing, who have kind of started a conversation. And what I've heard from them is that they hope to have some feedback that we would be able to look at,
okay,
in the next week or so.
okay. We have Kyle. Bob, were you finished what you were saying?
Right, I'm not going to make a motion unless it's
Okay.
appropriate and people.
And Dick is kind of saying, let's hold for a week or two on what should be included. Is that right? Okay, Kyle and then Tom.
Maybe a point of order question. I'm right to think that because this is generated and sort of posted with email, that this is public domain now. If people want to see this or kind of mull it over,
Right.
I'm fine sharing it. Does there need to be any kind of
Well,
committee discussion about that?
Well, I think.
I don't really know. I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it's open because it's part of our meeting today.
Okay.
And I mean, that would be my take on it. So I can have these. Bob, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I don't think, and I'm not sure about this, and maybe the chair of the whole thing might have a comment, but and because I ran into this a little bit with my committee, I really don't think it's appropriate for members of the committee to be sending out to the public documents that we're considering and have not yet adopted, etc.
Right, because they're draft.
Right. That runs a little bit against the grain of what I generally believe, which is
Right.
open. But that sounds, it could get in the way of our deliberations.
Okay, so Kevin, a question to you. Are the documents that are, the draft documents that are created here, are they public? How does this work in terms of sharing and everything?
As of 1 hour and 39 minutes ago, when those were shared on a screen in a public meeting, they're now a public document, period. So anybody can access them. Now, us sending them out is another thing. But they're a public document and these will be posted on our website. So Catherine will post anything that we've shared in our meetings on our website. So that's going to happen. Now, I think there needs to be a very clear caveat though. Like when Kyle first put up the chart, my first thought was, like not because it's not amazing, but because there's a lot of discussion that needs to go into that. And I would hate for somebody to take that and start throwing it out there saying, this is what we're going to do. If I were a staff person in the county, I would have 1,000 unanswered questions. If I were a member, if I were a citizen, I would have 1,000 unanswered questions. And so my concern is that as this information goes out there, that we're all very clear. This was an initial draft for discussion.
Right, this is a first take.
But that horse left the barn 1 hour and 40 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Tom, you had your hand up at one point. Did we answer or did we get to your question?
Oh, I had a couple of points, but they can wait. We're running out of time here.
Okay, and I think we've got just, I just have us like with a couple more minutes before we need to have public comment. Yes, Dick.
Just in response to that point about public documents, Kevin's right. The minute it went on this site, it's a public document. It doesn't matter if it's a
Right.
working draft. However, under the Public Disclosure Act, if we circulated, I'm not saying we should do this, I'm saying we have the right. If we circulated a document like Kyle's privately, we can continue to work on a working draft without disclosing it until we make a decision on it. But at the point at which we make a decision, all those working drafts become public. That's what the public disclosure law says.
Okay,
So
and it's really important that everything says it's draft.
Yeah,
and
everything
you
should have in big red letters should say, 18-point font should say draft.
Yeah, because this is all conceptual. Okay.
FYI, these documents don't say draft.
Mine
Yes, they
does.
do.
They didn't as attachments, but they've been
They,
modified.
what we've shown on the screen says draft.
Right. I modified mine.
Yeah, okay, so, Tom, can we do your questions now in a couple minutes or do you want to do it after the public comment?
Okay, just quickly, one agency that I didn't see as a possible inclusion is the Islands oil spill folks.
Are they in the
And-
Marine Resources Group, or is that a separate group?
I don't know.
It's a
Okay.
Just
private
mentioning.
nonprofit. It's not a county entity.
Oh, okay.
The other conflict arose in my head was somebody mentioned the Public Works Department called Equipment Replacement and Repair, ERR. They're responsible for justifying and buying big vehicles. So let's say that they just bought 6 new pickup trucks and a bunch of other gasoline powered equipment. But the new department here decides to switch ASAP urgently. I will use the word urgent because I've seen it a couple of times, to go to electric vehicles. You know, those are the kinds of squabbles that we're gonna see and how they get resolved.
So are you saying that's a reason for leaving that program where it is and working more internally to try to get people to switch to
I don't know
electric?
how to solve. I don't know how to solve that one. Whether ER&R should take seriously the recommendations of the new department, or whether they're forced to take them within 3 years or something like that.
Okay.
And Tom, what did ER&R stand for?
Equipment repair and replacement.
Okay, thank you.
It's rental and reserve officially. It's in the chat.
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and open up public comment? And at that point, we'll go ahead and have people unmute and bring your video up. And I will just give you a nod. We're gonna kind of keep it to 3 minutes, okay? So does anybody in the public want to speak? I see Alejandra. Okay, go ahead.
I'm so impressed and excited by the work that you're all doing, especially Kyle's presentation. Thank you. Just a comment on the overall structure of the power situation. My observation is that I've been really disappointed at the amount of power that the county council has relative to their, shall I say, lack of expertise in the things that they're deciding about. And I, once upon a time, back at the very beginning of this whole process with this commission, the CRC, I made a proposal that the county council be held responsible for implementing and enforcing the vision statement and the comp plan. The whole idea of that was to take the politics out of what they're responsible for doing. And at this point, I'm tempted to say that they should be, I mean, I'm talking about what we put in the charter, that they're responsible for implementing and enforcing climate and environmental goals. In addition to creating this department or something along those lines, that the vision statement either gets strengthened and the comp plan gets strengthened to the point that all this stuff is incorporated in there, or that we separately say that the county council is responsible. Because my fear is we create this great elaborate position and this new department and all this stuff. And then all we have to do is the political winds blow in a particular direction on the election year. And we have a county council that is not going to cooperate with it, going to do everything they can to sabotage it and make sure it doesn't happen. It does, the ordinances don't match. They're not going to fund whatever it is that needs to be funded. And so I'm afraid of that. And that's the thing that I want us to look at, how to incorporate into the whole charter so that the council is required to cooperate with this and aren't going to, come around, because people are going to be upset. Everybody even environmentalists who love to talk about how we need to do this, that, and the other thing, when it comes down to their own property, are suddenly like, wait a minute, but I wanted to do X, Y, or Z. And, and the people who aren't attuned to environmental issues are going to be even more angry and upset And those people are going to squabble to the county council, and the county council, as we've seen recently, is going to then back down and buckle in response to what they perceive as public pressure. And then all this stuff is going to collapse. So I just think it's really important to figure out how to create a structure that holds all this together and isn't just subject to, you know, we've got a whole, last thing I want to say, we've got a whole government that's founded from the 1700s on premises that are false, because people didn't know back in 1700 that, gosh, nature is not an unlimited resource that we can extract as much as we want to make money on. I mean, the whole government is based on that. So it's no wonder that people think, well, you know, my private property matters more than anything else, and I should have the right to exploit this or that because it's in the Constitution. You know, I'm aware of that, and it, you know, we're in sort of a difficult situation because of that. But and the only other thing I wanted to say in terms of structure is somehow the consideration needs to be, where does Opalco fit into all this? I mean, I know they're not a county entity, but you know, there needs to be some way of collaboration with how our energy is being produced right here in the county, and it not just sort of be a separate thing over there doing their own thing.
Okay,
I guess that's it for now. Thank you.
thank you. So let's see. Lovell, did you want to say anything? Or Michelin? Lovell, yes?
Yeah, I really just want to say thank you. I'm here today just to gather more information, and I'm just so impressed with all the work that you all are doing. And yeah, Kyle, that what I saw of that draft of the organizational chart and the outline that you prepared was just really impressive. And I just thank you all for the service that you're providing to the county, being on the Charter Review Commission. Thank you.
Okay. Michelin, did you want to say anything? Or are you good? Okay,
I did want to say something, but I can't
Okay.
find my hand
that's okay. We called
to
on
raise
you.
my hand. I just wanted to say thank you too. Again, I'm kind of like Lovell. I'm here to gather information, but you all have my support. I want you to know that. I think this is a wonderful thing you're doing, but what I really want to say is thank you for your sacrifice. Anybody staying up till 3 a.m. deserves a thank you, or midnight, or I don't care. No, thank you. Thank you. You're doing what I can't do. And I'm so happy you're here representing me. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. Anything else from the public? Okay, so we're going to close public comment, and let's go back to where we are and what's our next step. And because we do need to keep moving this train forward, okay? And we've got some timelines coming up. Yes, Kyle, go for it.
Madam Chair, have you thought at all about what you'd like to write into the agenda for next week? I mean, where do you see us? Because I think that goal setting is important right now.
Well, it seems like if we could get to a point where we can start defining what we think the umbrella of the organization looks like, that would be very helpful, very helpful. And then kind of, as soon as we have something from the community that's doing a little pro bono work for us, if we can get that in. But I have worked with lawyers all my life, and I know how long that process can be. And I also feel like, you know, I want us before the commission on the 5th, because we need to have time to come back, regroup, and repitch. And I don't want us sandwiched in, because we've been doing excellent work. We're really moving forward. And I just want to keep it going. And I like the fact that Bob's kind of up there dealing with the executive powers, and Kyle's looking at how does it all fit together. And, you know, we're all in this together. So I'm excited about what's happening, but I do think we need to stay on task. So, Bob, you want to say something?
In that case, Madam Chair, I do think that it is time for a motion, and this motion will my motion is to confirm that we are at a place where we are looking at the bottom, the floor of what we want this department and commissioner to look like, being the addition of planning and development, environmental resources, and environmental health. Okay, and then the other things that have been discussed, but those three providing the floor. And the ceiling we have not yet reached, but certainly Kyle's presentation does float around up at the top. And this motion would be recognizing the fact that Kevin is out there digging up the legal on this, and that it will be subject to what Kevin comes up. But that puts us in a place of knowing where we are, and we can go from there. And when legal says chop it down, we can't wait, I don't think. You know, that's the problem. We can't wait to do the next thing until we are told what is legal. We have to propose it and then find out if it's legal. So that's, I make that motion.
Okay. Do we have a second? We have a second with Sharon. Do we have discussion? Kevin?
I'm not in favor to support them. I'm not in the place where I can support the motion at this time, because I don't think we have the information we need, and I think it's premature for that reason. I don't want to put a motion on the floor that describes an action before we understand what actions we can take. And Bob, I love your idea. I'm not there yet. I just want to make sure that when we do a motion that we're saying, this is the department we're creating, that we have more information, so we can say, instead of like your motion now could pass today, next week we may need to refine it. So my question is, why do we need a motion right now? Why couldn't it wait a week?
Okay, let's hear from Liz and then Tom and then Dick.
I'm in agreement with what Dick had said earlier and gave us the framework for how quickly this could shift, and what Kevin is saying about let's wait a week and then we can solidly know where we are and set that floor. I think it is imperative to have the floor and know where we are and then build from there. But I think it's premature for the motion.
Okay, let me hear from Tom and then back, and then Dick, and then back to Bob.
I would just like to recall my experience as a planning commissioner, that although we tend to think of their activities as mostly environmental review, they are also responsible for economic review. We would have the EDC come in and speak to us about the situation in the economics in the county. So to have that economic aspect put underneath this new office, I doubt that. I think that's a dilution of their responsibility. I still think that should remain with the council and the county manager.
So you're talking about the planning commission?
Or yeah, any decision-making folks that are concerned now with economic considerations in addition to environmental considerations.
Well, you know, that's a question. I don't know where the economic people fit in here. So that might be something we need to talk more about. Dick, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that even though that was my suggestion about what a floor might be, although I didn't use that term, I also am not prepared to support that motion today. I think it's premature.
Okay, Bob?
I am perfectly willing to wait that 1 week that Kevin suggested, because after all, we only have about 5 minutes remaining in this meeting, and then when the next second we're together will be 1 week from now. So I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Actually, 2 hours less than 1 week.
Okay, Kyle?
I withdraw my second.
Okay, so those motions have been withdrawn. Okay.
I'm wondering from the group if there's anything in terms of the layout or I'm tempted to continue to do some kind of wordsmithing and moving, but is there anything about the handouts that anyone wants to? I heard just a few real kind of word changes early on for kind of the actual build out and language, but I'm fine just leaving them as placeholders. But does anyone want anything changed in the picture to make it more readable? Or
Dick?
I would like to see going forward, both on your document, Kyle, and on Bob's, and anything else that anybody puts forward. And I'm serious, like an 18 or 20 point font right at the top in red, discussion draft. Because one of the worst things that could happen to us is for the public to look at this and people get a group gets all up in arms about something, and then we wind up not even going in that direction, but we've created this group that we've thoroughly alarmed, and I'd really like to avoid that.
Kevin, and then I'm going to say something. Go ahead.
2 points. One is I would encourage us to do, I can't remember what it's called, an ink, whatever. It's a format in Word where it goes diagonally in a lesser shade across the entire page, and it says working draft or draft, for exactly the reasons.
It's a watermark. I think you look for a watermark.
That's it. A watermark. So I would encourage Kyle, when you send these documents to Catherine, that they include a watermark, and that no one share the documents that don't have a watermark, same draft. Second point I want to make is I'm not doing the legal research. I'm not a lawyer. What I understand is people in the community are talking about this and have said that they want to help us think this through. And so, and what I heard from folks yesterday, as recently as yesterday, was that they felt that they would have some information for us later this week. So,
okay. So I think for the next meeting, we should really be looking at environmental resources, community development, and also environmental health, and saying to ourselves why this shouldn't be in there and why this should be in there. And do we really want this in there? And do we not want this in there? And then I also think we should look at, in Kyle's document, those components that might need to be augmented and figure out how we're getting into some of those areas, because some of those areas are at the heart of what this position, I think, needs to be able to make happen. Does that kind of set enough of a focus for where we're going next? Okay. And I have us at 11:59. So are we ready to adjourn? Yes, we're ready to adjourn. The meeting's adjourned. Yes, Liz, everybody's good?
And thank Kyle and Bob again.
Yes, that's why I started out thanking all of you. Are doing incredible work, and I really appreciate it at all the different levels. I know some people are working Sundays in different committees, so I just really appreciate everything everybody's doing. And Kyle and Bob, thank you so much for making this such a valuable meeting today. Okay.
And Kyle, I may contact you about trying to do something about getting some of the ideas that were in my thing into what you have, so that we can eventually produce one document.
You got it.
Dick.
End the recording.